She lied about everything, turning out my inheritance of $250, $0 into her secret affair, and then suing me for half the family estate, claiming I manipulated her when I found out she'd been secretly draining our joint account for months. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, laying it all out because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. The craziest part, it all started with what I thought was just a routine check. Turns out my wife Lisa had been lying to me about everything, about her whereabouts, her plans, even about the money we shared. The most shocking thing, her turning my inheritance of $250, $0 into her secret affair, and then turning around and suing me for half the family estate, claiming I manipulated her when I found out she'd been secretly draining our joint account for months. We had been together for over 10 years. I thought I knew her, or at least I thought I did. She was the kind of woman who always looked good, spoke convincingly, and seemed to have her life together. We got married right out of college. I was working as an engineer, she was a marketing executive. We bought a house, had a kid, and I honestly thought we were building something solid. But all of that started to fall apart the day I started noticing small things, missed calls, late nights, unexplained absences. It was subtle at first. She'd leave her phone face down, hide her messages, or get defensive when I asked about her plans. I remember one night, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well, and I caught her on the couch with her phone in her hand, quickly deleting a message. When I asked who it was, she just snapped, told me I was paranoid, that I didn't trust her. That should been a red flag, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was overthinking things. Then she started taking more trips for work, but the timing was suspicious. She'd be gone for days, and her stories didn't add up. I'd find her phone bill and see calls to a number I didn't recognize, an unknown number that, at first, I thought was just a work contact. But then I noticed the pattern: late-night calls, messages exchanged in secret, and receipts from hotels. That didn't match her stories. One day, she forgot to clear her browsing history on her laptop. I saw the messages, flirty, suggestive, explicit. It was clear she was having an affair. The man's name was Mark, a guy from her office. I felt like the floor dropped beneath me. My stomach sank. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the mother of my child, was cheating on me with her coworker. What made it worse was the money. I found out she'd been draining our joint account, small amounts at first, then larger sums over months. I thought she was just shopping or paying bills, but it was clear she was funneling money into some secret account linked to Mark. I confronted her about it, and her reaction was icy. She everything called me paranoid, said I was just jealous. But I had bank statements, receipts, and a trail of digital evidence. I was furious, hurt, and confused. How could she lie about everything? How could she betray me, our kid, everything we built? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started digging deeper. That's when I found out she'd been lying about the inheritance too. She convinced me to put the money in her name because she said she wanted to manage it wisely. Turns out, she'd used that money to fund her affair, buy designer clothes, and even pay off some of her credit card debt on top of draining our savings. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't even process it at first. I felt like I was living in some nightmare. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, trusting her, loving her, thinking she was my partner. Instead, she was building a secret life behind my back. The worst part, she was now trying to turn the tables on me, claiming I was the manipulative one because I discovered her lies. She had the nerve to sue me for half the estate, claiming I exploited her when I found out she'd been stealing from us. I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd have to fight for my own money, my family, and my sanity. But here I am, trying to pick up the pieces after discovering that the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was nothing more than a master manipulator and cheat. I'm not sure how this will end, but I know one thing: trust is gone, and now I have to decide what's next. After I uncovered everything, her affair, the drained accounts, the inheritance being used as her personal playground, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My initial reaction was raw, pure fury. I wanted to scream, to shout, to call her every name in the book, but I knew that wouldn't do any good. Instead, I sat there, staring at the mountain of evidence I'd gathered, bank statements, messages, hotel receipts, and felt a sick sense of betrayal settle deep into my gut. I remember the moment I confronted her. I called her at work, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. When she picked up, her voice was that same bitchy tone she always used, condescending, dismissive. I told her I knew everything. Her reaction was instant. She snapped, denying everything, saying I was paranoid, that I was accusing her of stuff she'd never do. The way she looked at me with that fake innocent face made my blood boil. She had the audacity to lie straight to my face, even when I had proof right in front of her. I told her I had enough. That I knew about Mark, about the money, about everything. That was when she started to get defensive, claiming I was just jealous, that I was paranoid because I didn't trust her. She said I was manipulating her, that I was trying to control her life. That's when I realized she'd been playing me all along, gaslighting me, making me question my own sanity. She kept insisting she loved me, that she'd never cheat, even as I laid out the evidence I'd collected. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I'd seen her true face, and it wasn't pretty. I told her I was done, that I wanted a divorce and full custody of our kid. That's when she started crying, fake tears streaming down her face, saying I was ruining everything, that she loved our family, that she'd change. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying for months, maybe years. I felt broken, betrayed, and furious all at once. The worst part was the money. I had trusted her with my inheritance, the $250, $0 I'd worked so hard to save. I thought she cared about our future, about our kids' college fund, about stability. Turns out she just saw it as her personal ATM. She'd been secretly draining it, using it to fund her affair, buy expensive clothes, and pay off her credit cards. I discovered she'd transferred chunks of that inheritance into some secret account she kept hidden from me. I felt like an idiot. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted her with everything? It hit me hard. How many lies, how many secrets? I started questioning everything about our life together. I felt so stupid for not noticing sooner. I'd been so focused on work, on providing, I never saw the signs. Now the evidence was right in front of me. The betrayal was complete. I decided I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started planning my next move. I wanted to get full control of the finances, protect what was left of my inheritance, and make sure she didn't take more than she already had. I also knew I needed legal help. She was already trying to turn things around, claiming I was the manipulative one because I'd discovered her affair. She even threatened to sue me for half the estate, claiming I'd manipulated her into signing papers or some nonsense. I wasn't going to let her do that. I knew I had to be strategic. I reached out to a lawyer, started gathering more evidence, and prepared for what I knew would be a long battle. The emotional toll was immense. I felt humiliated, angry, and deeply hurt. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I saw her for what she really was: a liar, a cheat, a thief. But I also realized I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had to fight back, not just for my money but for my dignity, and so I did. I filed for divorce, took full control of our joint accounts, and started documenting everything. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, spin her lies, and maybe even try to take what she thought she deserved. But I was done playing her game. I'd learned the hard way that trusting blindly is a mistake. From now on, I'd keep my guard up. I'd protect what was mine and make sure she didn't walk away with everything, especially not my inheritance, which I'd worked so hard for. It's crazy how fast your life can turn upside down. One moment, everything's normal. The next, you're fighting to save what's left of your sanity and your assets. I don't know how this story will end, but I do know this: I'm not going down without a fight. And honestly, I hope anyone reading this who's in a similar situation learns that honesty and transparency are everything. Once that's gone, all that's left is chaos and sometimes revenge. After I made the decision to go all in on fighting for my rights and my money, everything changed. The legal process was a nightmare, long, draining, and filled with more surprises than I expected. I thought I'd just be fighting to get my inheritance back, to stop her from draining our accounts further, and to secure custody of our kid. But it turned out she had even more tricks up her sleeve. From the moment I hired a lawyer, things escalated quickly. She started playing the victim, claiming I was the one controlling her, manipulating her into signing documents she didn't understand, and turning the whole thing into some kind of abuse story. She even accused me of financial abuse, saying I was so controlling that I'd forced her to drain the accounts, that I'd manipulated her into giving up her independence. It was absurd, but the court bought some of it because she knew how to spin her lies well. Meanwhile, I had mountains of evidence. Bank statements showing the transfers she made to her secret account, emails between her and Mark, hotel receipts, and even her own text messages where she admitted to the affair. I was furious that she could lie so blatantly, and at the same time I was trying to stay calm and focused. I knew if I lost my temper or made mistakes, she'd use that against me. The most shocking moment came when I discovered she'd filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I manipulated her into signing over some of the estate. Her lawyer argued that I exploited her trust, and she wanted half of everything: our house, the inheritance, even the small savings I had left. She claimed I'd lied about my inheritance, that I'd hidden assets, and that I'd coerced her into signing papers. The judge listened, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. I knew I had to fight hard and present my side clearly. It was during this period that I realized how deep her deception ran. The more I dug, the more I uncovered her lies. She'd been secretly draining money from our joint account for months, often in small amounts, enough to make me suspicious but not enough to raise alarms immediately. When I finally confronted her directly, she said she was just shopping, that I was paranoid and insecure. But I knew better. I'd seen the evidence. I'd seen the hotel receipts, the late-night calls, the credit card bills from places I'd never heard of. I also found out that she'd been lying about her relationship with Mark. She claimed they were just friends, that it was innocent. But I had texts from her, explicit messages, even photos she'd sent him. She was having sex with him, no doubt about it. And she was lying about everything: her feelings, her intentions, her loyalty. It was like discovering a whole new person, someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd been living a double life. The emotional toll was enormous. I felt betrayed on every level: trust, love, even basic respect. I'd loved her, built a life with her, and now I was fighting to keep what was mine. I'd never felt so angry and helpless at the same time. It was as if my entire world was crumbling and I couldn't do anything to stop it. Every night I lay awake, replaying everything, wondering how I could have missed the signs, how I could have been so blind. But I refused to give up. I knew I had to be strategic. I kept detailed records, hired experts to trace her financial activities, and prepared for the worst. I also started thinking about what I wanted long-term, whether I could forgive her, whether I wanted to stay married, or if I should just cut my losses and walk away. The thought of losing everything I'd worked for, my inheritance, my home, my relationship with my kid, terrified me. But I also knew I couldn't let her walk all over me. One thing I learned during this chaos is that betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. It makes you question everything you thought was real. I used to believe in honesty, loyalty, and integrity. Now I see how fragile those things can be. But I also learned that you have to stand up for yourself. You have to fight for what's right, even if it feels like the whole world is against you. I wasn't about to let her take everything, especially not my inheritance, which I'd worked so hard to save. So I doubled down. I kept my head clear, stayed focused on the facts, and prepared for the final showdown. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, spin her lies, and maybe even try to turn the courts against me. But I was ready. I had the evidence, the truth, and the legal backing. I just hoped the system would see through her bullshit and give me back what's mine. At this point, I've realized that betrayal isn't just about money or infidelity. It's about trust, something that once broken is almost impossible to repair. But I also know I can't let her win. Not just for me, but for my kid, who deserves stability and honesty. I don't know how this will end, but I do know I'll keep fighting until I get some kind of justice. Because if I don't, I'll always wonder what might have been if I'd just been smarter, more cautious, more aware. The legal battles dragged on longer than I expected, and every day felt like a new assault on my already fragile sense of stability. She was relentless, pulling every trick she could think of, filing counterclaims, accusing me of financial manipulation, trying to paint herself as the victim. I won't lie, it was exhausting. I had to dig deep into every piece of evidence I had, prepare for court appearances, and deal with the constant emotional. One of the worst moments was when she brought in her own lawyer, a slick guy who seemed to thrive on twisting facts. Her strategy was clear: try to discredit me at every turn, make me look like the bad guy who was trying to control her and manipulate her. She claimed I forced her into giving up her independence, that I was controlling her financially and emotionally. The truth? I just wanted transparency. I wanted to protect my inheritance, my assets, and our future. But she spun it into some narrative where she was the helpless victim, trapped by my supposed manipulations. Meanwhile, I kept pushing forward with my evidence. I had bank statements showing her transfers, emails where she admitted to her affair, and even a few recordings I made of her talking about Mark. I knew I had to be careful. Any misstep could be used against me. So I stayed disciplined, kept my cool, and let the facts do the talking. Every time she tried to spin a story, I countered with proof. The most shocking thing I discovered during this process was how deep her lies went. She'd been secretly funneling money into her own account, using the inheritance as a personal fund. She bought expensive designer clothes, went on trips she never told me about, and even paid off some of her credit card debt with the stolen money. It was so blatant, yet she kept denying everything, insisting she was innocent, that I was the one controlling her. That's when I realized how good she was at manipulating people. Her charm, her bitchy attitude, her constant lies, they all worked together to keep her afloat. I also learned that her affair with Mark wasn't just physical, it was strategic. She wanted the money, the status, the thrill. She saw our inheritance as her ticket out of what she called a boring life, and Mark was just her accomplice. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I felt. I'd trusted her with my life, my future, and she'd been secretly planning to leave me for this guy all along. Emotionally, I was a wreck. I went through phases of fury, heartbreak, and numbness. One minute I was convinced I'd expose her lies and take back control. The next, I felt so betrayed I couldn't get out of bed. I questioned everything, how I could have been so blind, so naive. I kept replaying the moments I missed the signs, the times I brushed off her strange behavior. I was angry at myself for trusting her, angry at her for lying, and angry at the universe for throwing this chaos at me. But despite all that, I knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her win. I kept telling myself that truth and justice mattered more than my pain. I also started to think about what I really wanted, whether I could rebuild after all this, or if I should just cut my losses and walk away. Honestly, I was leaning toward the latter. I was tired of fighting, tired of feeling like I was the only one trying to hold our life together. One thing I realized during this ordeal is that money, trust, and honesty are intertwined. Once trust is broken, everything else crumbles. That inheritance, which I thought was a symbol of my hard work and future security, had become a weapon in her hands. Every dollar she drained, every lie she told, chipped away at my confidence and my sense of security. I felt like I was losing myself in the process, trying to stay afloat amid the wreckage of my marriage and my financial stability. But I also learned something else. I wasn't alone. I had friends, a lawyer, and most importantly, my own sense of right and wrong. I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me into giving up. I had to stand firm, even if it meant losing everything temporarily. I had to believe that honesty would prevail, that justice would come, and that someday I'd be able to look back and say I fought for what was mine, my inheritance, my dignity, my peace of mind. Every day now feels like a war, but I'm not backing down. I'm preparing for the final battle, knowing that whatever the outcome, I'll come out of this knowing I did everything possible to protect myself and my future. I've learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who you really are, someone willing to fight for what's right even when the odds are stacked against you. And honestly, that's the only way I can see myself moving forward. The court hearings became a blur of legal jargon, false accusations, and endless back and forths. I felt like I was fighting a battle on every front, trying to prove my innocence, protect what was rightfully mine, and keep my sanity intact. She was relentless, spinning her lies, claiming I manipulated her into signing documents, that I'd controlled her life and finances. Her lawyer played dirty, trying to paint me as the villain, a man who used his money and power to dominate his wife. I knew I had the evidence, but that didn't make it any easier to stay composed during those hearings. What really pushed me over the edge was when she brought in her own expert witnesses. They tried to argue that I'd been abusive, controlling, and even mentally unstable. I sat there, listening to their nonsense, feeling my blood boil. I wanted to scream, to shout that she was the one who'd been lying, cheating, draining our bank accounts, and secretly screwing Mark behind my back, but I kept my cool. I knew losing my temper would only make things worse. Meanwhile, I was doing everything I could to gather more proof. I hired a private investigator to track her movements, to confirm her trips, her meetings, and her secret rendezvous with Mark. I also had my lawyer subpoena her phone records and bank statements. Every piece of evidence was a brick in my wall of defense. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became how deep her deception ran. One of the most brutal realizations came when I found out she'd been lying about her relationship with Mark from the start. She told me they were just colleagues, that there was nothing going on. But I had her explicit texts, her flirty messages, even photos of her in bed with him. She'd been having sex with him probably for months, while pretending everything was fine at home. That betrayal cut me to the bone. It was one thing to suspect infidelity. It was another entirely to see proof so explicit, and knowing she had lied about it the entire time. I also learned that she'd been secretly draining our joint account for over half a year, small amounts initially, then larger sums. She used the inheritance money I'd given her to fund her affair, buy designer clothes, and pay off her credit cards. She even transferred some of the inheritance into her own account, hiding it from me. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, thinking she was just shopping or paying bills, when in reality she was living a double life, with my money fueling her lies. The emotional toll was staggering. I oscillated between anger, despair, and numbness. One day I was furious, ready to tear her apart in court. The next I felt hopeless, wondering if I'd ever get justice. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I was faced with the cold reality that she'd deceived me for years. I questioned everything, how I could have missed the signs, how I'd let her manipulate me so thoroughly. Despite all that, I knew I couldn't let her win. I had to stay strong. I kept detailed records of every financial transaction, every lie she told, every piece of evidence I gathered. I stayed up late nights, reviewing documents, cross-referencing emails, and preparing my testimony. My goal was clear. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, to be held accountable for her betrayal and theft. What hurt most was that I'd built my entire identity around trust and honesty. Those values had been shattered. I realized betrayal isn't just about money or infidelity. It's about the destruction of the foundation of your life. It's feeling like you're living someone else's nightmare, questioning if anything you believed in was real. I had to rebuild my sense of self from the ground up, piece by piece. In the quiet moments, I'd think about everything I'd lost, my inheritance, my marriage, my sense of security, and wonder what life would look like after this. Would I be able to forgive her? Could I ever trust again? Or was I destined to carry this weight forever? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew I'd fight to find them. I had to, because giving up now would be admitting defeat, and I wasn't about to let her take everything, including my dignity, without a fight. I've realized that in the end, what matters most is truth. No matter how much she lies, how much she manipulates, I have to hold onto my integrity. I owe that to myself and to my kid. I want him to see that even when life throws its worst at you, you stand up, face it head on, and do what's right. That's what I'm trying to do now, stay true to myself, fight for what's mine, and hope that someday I'll be able to put this nightmare behind me. Because no matter how deep the betrayal, I refuse to let it define me. The final court date came sooner than I expected, and I was ready. All the evidence I'd collected, the bank statements, the emails, the recordings, was laid out on the table. I watched her sit there, her once confident, bitchy attitude replaced by a pale, defeated look. She knew she had lost. Her lawyer tried one last desperate move, claiming I had somehow manipulated the court or hid assets, but it was useless. The judge looked at the mountain of proof, listened to my testimony, and saw through her lies for what they were. When the verdict was finally read, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. She was ordered to pay back every cent she drained from our joint account, plus damages for her deceit and breach of trust. She was also any claim to the inheritance, my money, my future, protected by the court's ruling. The judge emphasized the importance of honesty and integrity in marriage and warned her about her ongoing legal misconduct. Watching her leave the courtroom, head bowed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The nightmare was finally over, or at least I hoped it was. I knew I'd be rebuilding from this, piece by piece. I also knew that trusting again would be a challenge, but I was determined to be cautious, to learn from everything I'd been through. In the weeks that followed, I started to piece my life back together. I filed for divorce, finalized custody arrangements for my kid, and began the slow process of healing. I closed the secret accounts, secured my assets, and made sure she couldn't manipulate me again. I also finally sat down with my son and explained everything in honest, simple terms. I wanted him to know that even when people betray you, you have to stay strong and do what's right. Looking back, I realize I learned some hard lessons. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to fully repair. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's difficult, is the only way to reclaim your life. I found out that money can be a tool for manipulation, but it can also be a weapon of justice. And most importantly, I learned that no matter how much someone lies or cheats, the truth will always come out in the end. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'm done living in fear of betrayal. I've been through hell, but I've come out stronger. I've learned to value honesty, loyalty, and self-respect above all else. And I've finally accepted that some people are just not worth the fight. They're not worth the pain, the lies, or the money they drain from your life. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, I'll say this: trust your instincts. Gather your evidence. Don't let anyone manipulate or gaslight you. Stand up for yourself, even if it means losing people you thought loved you. Because at the end of the day, the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. And if you're facing betrayal, remember, you have the strength to fight back, to reclaim what's yours, and to rebuild. It's not easy, but it's worth it.